So today we're going to look at the differences between a typical church and a cult. What makes them different? And I'll tell you, I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. Not only because we're studying cults and you should know what it's about, but I had a friend that actually got caught up in a cult, and to this day I don't know where she is. She was in college, and at first it all seemed good and happy and positive. Pretty soon she started cutting off her ties with her family and her friends, and before you know it, she disappeared. She dropped out of college. She went to live with this group of religious people, and I've not heard from her since. So I also want you to be informed, because it's really easy to get caught up in this sometimes, and then you realize, oh my gosh, this isn't what I expected, and you can't get out, or you're brainwashed so much by that point you can't. So it's for a couple of reasons that I'm showing you this, okay? All right. And remember at home, those of you taking notes, that if you need to pause it at any time or skip in your notes, you can do that too. Okay, so let's take a look. We're going to basically do a T-chart, and we're going to have mainstream church ideas on the left side and then cult ideas on the right. So our first example, a mainstream church, the leaders are open to questions. It's okay to ask, why do I believe in God? Why do good things happen, bad things happen to good people, for example? It's okay to question. In a cult, they have unquestioning obedience. You follow the rules and you don't ask questions. In a typical church, number 2, the truth is the bottom line. You're trying to get to a truth of some sort. In a cult, loyalty is even more important. It's about being loyal to the group, and in particular to the leader. More important than what they believe quite often. Number 3, a mainstream church teaches the whole Bible, where a cult will use just 1 or 2 ideas out of the Bible, and that's all they focus on. So they only use portions of the scripture that they want to use. Number 4, in mainstream churches, the doctrine is verified by others outside the group. So for example, a Methodist church believes that Jesus Christ existed, but you also notice that Catholics and Lutherans believe there was a Jesus as well. So there's other groups that believe the same thing. In a cult, their doctrine is usually only supported by one group, and that is them. And the leader proclaims what the truth is. So I'll give you an example. There's one group we're going to learn about that believed that there was a UFO inside this mountain in France, and that on a given day, that basically the second coming was going to happen and the earth was going to end, and the UFO was going to come out of the mountain, and they were going to hitch a ride and go to the UFO planet for the aliens. Not something you hear in other churches quite often. See what I mean? It's a very unique idea. All right, number 5. Mainstream churches are based on tenets passed down over the centuries. So there is a history to what they believe that's been going on for a while. In a cult, they claim that there's a new truth that nobody knew about, and they just discovered it in Genesis or whatever. Because a lot of times, if there are false ideas throughout churches or religions, they'll get weeded out if they're wrong throughout time. Not always, but sometimes. Number 6, in a mainstream church, people are free to form their own conclusions. So it's okay for me to figure out whether I think drinking a couple glasses of wine at dinner is okay, based on my religion. I can figure out whether I think it's okay to live with my mate before I get married. They kind of leave that up to the people in that particular church. In a cult, the leader's conclusions must be accepted, and they will tell you, you must marry within this group, you must have 5 children. They will actually tell you what you believe and what you should do. Now, let's be honest. Are there churches, maybe some churches that you go to in this room, that tell you you're going to hell if you do this or that? Yeah, there are. So this is why we need more than one thing, because some of our churches borderline cross over into a cult. In fact, I have to be very careful when I teach this, because there are some of your churches in here, even maybe, that have been accused of being a cult at some time. So I want to be very respectful of that and make you understand the difference between the two. Okay. Right, number 7, mainstream churches have an emphasis on unity, unifying as a group. And notice the twist in the word here. The cult focuses on uniformity, that we all should be the same and all should believe exactly the same thing. Number 8, our mainstream churches are not elitist, meaning that they don't think that they are above somebody else. A cult believes that they are elitist, that if you don't go their way, you're going straight to hell. That's just the way it is. Now, again, are there churches that believe that are not called cults? Yeah, there are certain churches that would knock on your doorstep tomorrow and say, if you don't join our church, you're going to hell. So understand that does sometimes cross over a little bit. So again, we've got to look at the whole picture, whether it's a cult or not. Okay. All right. Number 9, our mainstream churches have an open program, meaning I can walk into a church anytime and check it out. I can go online and find out what Lutherans believe. In a cult, they typically have a hidden agenda. I'll give you an example. Tom Cruise is a Scientologist. You maybe have heard about that group. It's very difficult to find information on the internet about what exactly goes on in church there and what exactly they believe. They tend to want to keep it a secret. Mainstream churches, number 10, they influence what you do. There is no doubt that they influence our behavior. In a cult, they manipulate what you would do. I'll give you an example. There's a group we're going to hear about today, and this leader basically said, the reason our children are sick is because you didn't have enough faith in us today. So you're being punished for your lack of faith. They manipulate you to believe certain things. Number 11, a mainstream church, the leader guides the group. In a cult, the leader lords over the group. There is definitely a difference, right? And lords over the group so much so that a lot of them believe that they are a god or a messiah. There's a guy in Australia right now that believes he is Jesus reincarnated and that he has come back from heaven. This guy interviews him on TV and he says, well, can I see the nail holes in your hands? And he said, no, but he thinks that he is Jesus come back from the dead. Number 12, main churches are integrationist, where it's okay to integrate. Like, for example, we have a bunch of churches that are working together to do 5th quarter for middle school and high schoolers to hang out, right? We work together on that. Whereas a cult is very isolationist. And so much so, like you mentioned, Austin, that they may require you to live in a compound by yourself, where you are not allowed to leave that compound. Mainstream churches have tradition, number 13. There is a background to them that's gone on for a while. Cults tend to base their beliefs on something that's happened in the last 25 years or less. It's usually something very modern. This is a big one. Number 14, In a mainstream church, you are free to join or leave the church whenever you want. Now, you might have people that are bumming about you leaving or whatever, but you are free to leave and go whenever you need to or whenever you want to. In a cult, they are told that if they leave that cult, they will immediately be damned to hell. And they are so afraid of losing their soul to hell that they don't dare leave. You'll see that in our video. It's really kind of scary. Number 15, the individual is responsible for their faith or their belief. In the cult, the individual is responsible to their leaders. Number 16 is also important. The mainstream church, the individual seeks, reads, studies, prays, and tries to figure out what God's will is. In a cult, the leaders tell the individual what God's will is. You know, because how, for example, if I'm in a mainstream church, how can they answer my question, why do bad things happen to good people? Why did the Holocaust happen if God exists? Because guess what? God isn't right here in front of me, right? Can I sit here and ask God what happened in the Holocaust? We can only discuss, summarize, guess maybe, right? But in a cult, you're sitting next to a living God. So guess what? He can tell me why it happened because he is God. So you get an immediate answer and they know the answers. Okay? All right, our last few. In a mainstream church, critical thinking is encouraged. They encourage you to ask those questions. In a cult, of course, analytical thinking is hindered or not allowed at all. You'd be labeled troublemaker. You'd probably be punished for it. Number 18, a mainstream church has complex answers, not simple answers. Like with our example of why, bad things happen to good people. Not an easy answer, right? In a cult, they have a very simplistic approach to life. And honestly, that is something that people like about a cult. Because if you're struggling about, should I have premarital sex? Should I drink alcohol? Should I do this? Should I do that? Is it right? Is it wrong? Well, a lot of churches are saying you need to read, pray, figure it out for yourself. But in a cult, they give you the answer so you don't have to worry about it, right? Takes the pressure off of you to have to figure things out. Some people like having that answer right there. And number 19, mainstream church, your beliefs are based on a lot of different things. On God, on individual prayer, on reading the Bible, on reading other books, on talking to other people, on leaders from your church, circumstances in your life. All of those things create what you believe. In a cult, the belief is based on 1 or 2 verses to lead you, and that's what you're given. So we're going to give you a checklist of the most common things you will see in a cult. But before we do that, I want you to identify them yourself a little bit. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you a short video, and it shows 2 people or families that escaped a cult, because usually that's only how we get information, because they're not going to bring video cameras into a cult, especially into a compound. And they're going to tell you what happened to them. I will tell you that some of it is pretty tough to listen to, just so you know. But I think it's important to understand how they're manipulating these people. So I'll show you how that works.